Once again, this is 416 and a little preview video for 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days. I'm coming to you from my daughter's room, which is the quietest room in the house right now. I want to talk a little bit about what some would call European art cinema, because that's what this movie is, and it's included in our list of films because it's an example of European art cinema, which makes it a very different viewing experience than watching mainstream American film. Art films can seem slow, confusing, grim, and even pretentious to mainstream viewers. But even if you don't care for these types of movies, you can learn a lot about the screenwriting tools by watching them. This is because the same tools are used differently in order to create very different effects. So here are a few things that I'd like you to look at for watching the movie. Number one, notice the exposition. Usually the exposition, which is the information that the audience needs in order to follow the film and participate in it emotionally, usually that's given up front. But how much information the audience actually needs, what the minimum effective dose is a creative choice. In 4 months, a lot of typical information we would expect at the beginning of the film, like what is it that the two women are preparing to do later in the day and why is it important to them, this information is withheld. So, unless you're patient and pay careful attention, it's easy to get lost at the beginning. The strategy at work here is this: instead of telling us the exposition in dialogue or showing us the exposition with blunt, clear images, we are dropped into the characters' lives as they seemingly go about an ordinary day. However, there are things that are unspoken and unseen that are clearly affecting the characters' choices and preparations. We, the audience, sense the presence of these things. We become curious and even tense about them, even though we don't yet know what they are. Overall, the strategy of implying exposition of events and conflicts without showing them directly is used with other screenwriting tools as well. For example, the second thing I want you to pay attention to is point of view. The point of view doesn't shift a lot, as it did in the previous film. We stay with one character's subjectivity for most of the movie. What's interesting is that when some key event happens, something of great importance to the audience and something of high tension but potential conflict, we are with the point of view of a character who is frustratingly, or thankfully, not in the room where it happens. We are nearby in the bathroom or the hallway. We are stuck in an apartment miles away. What we don't see and our anxiety about what might be happening there creates enormous tension. For viewers attuned to this kind of indirect storytelling, the film is as tense as a nail biting thriller. Along these same lines, notice that there are lots of beats of preparation and aftermath. This movie is all about these scenes, often eliminating or underplaying the actual event that the preparation and aftermath bookends. Lastly, I want you to pay attention to how the atmosphere and the tone create tension. By atmosphere, I mean those details of the environment, details of sets, props, environmental noise, lighting, that give us a feeling of what might happen next. Doesn't tell us literally or precisely what might happens next. It just gives us. So even if those feelings aren't literal or rational, they are creating tension and make us dread sort of what's coming next. Now, by tone, I mean light or dark. A film like School of Rock can be lighthearted, silly, and a bit unrealistic. By contrast, notice which cinematic elements in this week's film make it dark as opposed to lighthearted and serious and gritty or realistic. Okay, so before I wrap this up, just so you aren't lost, let me give you some background on the setting and circumstances of the story. This is a Romanian film, and it's set in communist Romania in the 1980s. During that time, the only available abortion methods, all illegal, could prove fatal to women, causing tens of thousands of deaths. It was a terrible situation. Additionally, the penalties for abortion were draconian. They were similar to the laws penalizing murder. The filmmaker said that the film is, on the one hand, is about responsibilities and decision making, but it's not the decision to have an abortion that it's essentially about. Oops, I forgot to tell you something. Even though Romania was a communist country, there were definitely class differences at the time, and those are explored in the film. So our main characters are of a lower class, and the protagonist's boyfriend and his family are of a different class, the class of the intelligentsia, the class that has more money and access to resources. This is important to understand because if something goes wrong for them, everything goes wrong. It's over. Whereas if something were to go wrong for someone of the upper classes, they can get by. So this class tension is part of the movie as well, and you might miss it if you don't already know it going in. Lastly, the film is about two women. In early versions of the screenplay, the protagonist was one of these women, but in the final film, it is the other. So you might ask yourself, why did he choose this point of view as opposed to the other point of view? All right, I think that's all you need before my bigger lecture. Go forth and watch the movie. I think some of you will find it amazing and some of you will find it challenging. So be prepared for that.